last year, just about this time, we were having a dissertation writing seminar. And popping out of my mouth was the phrase EcoField. And I asked people around, I said, well, anybody ever heard of that term? Nobody had, so immediately I Googled it. And at that time, there was only one reference to this phrase, EcoField, E-C-O-F-I-E-L-D. And a group of scientists at the University of Urbino in Italy, headed by Alma Farina, had been studying the combination or the integration of ecology or ecosystems with quantum fields. And they have brought those two domains together to explain the data that they had been turning up over about a 10-year period. And no paradigm that they had was sufficient to explain or approach this data. And so they advanced what I'm calling the EcoField hypothesis. They call it the EcoField paradigm. Let me give you an example of how that works. Here you have a bunch of Italians. I'd like to have seen this. And they are studying a particular ecofield in the prairie. And they're studying the prairie, in the prairie, a skylark. And they selected skylarks because skylarks can live in mountains, woodlands, or prairies. But almost 100% of the time, they select to live in the prairies. And this fascinated them. They started out with what they called acoustical ecology, an attractor ecology, where they were recording the songs of the skylarks and found a very complex language that was an attractive force to other skylarks and other birds, but particular skylarks that would come. Then, as the research unfolded, they saw that the skylarks themselves were interacting in some language with insects. And then they saw that the insects were interacting with a particular kind of grass. And the grass was interacting with a very precise kind of soil, and it took a particular kind of rock to produce this soil. So this is what they advanced as a definition of an ecofield. Listen to it closely. An ecofield is a space configuration, prairie, full of meaning and information transfers under the umbrella of an epistemological landscape. In other words, the landscape itself had a language, a complex language, in which there was a transfer of meaning, not only between the skylarks, but that whole system I just described. And Farina himself said, it seems to us that even the soil and even the rocks have an interior consciousness. Now, these are double-blind study, open trial scientists reaching the conclusion through the data that's coming to them that there is a mother tongue happening in a particular area that they're calling an ecofield. And then the universe itself, but particularly the Earth, becomes a system of interlocking ecofields. Now, that may not be startling to you as it was to me, but it sort of rocked my ship. I went back to the base of the Tower of Babel and I said, oh, they weren't speaking a human language at all. They were speaking the mother tongue of the ecofield, the language of the landscape. And that is what we've lost. That is what we have to retrieve in order to move through this era that we're in. Go for a minute with me to Plato's cave. Plato, brother Plato, dear brother Plato, served this great service of seeing the illusions in the cave, the shadows, and taking us out of the cave toward the light toward the enlightenment of reason, rationalism, and the absolute. I did that very thing when I was there. I looked at the wall last fall when I was in the Commencement where Plato forged this allegory. I went out, looked at the bright sun, the blue sky, and as alluring as that was, I felt drawn back down into the cave. And I thought about Carl Jung's phrase as I went down. You have to go into endarkment if you're going to get the spirit of the depths. And I went in and I felt of the limestone. And there was a whole ecosystem inside the cave. A little pool of water and a crevice. Looked like a vagina. I looked up and there was a beam of light coming down and pointing right into the crevice. And I said to myself, as alluring as it is to go outside to absolute reason, I'm drawn to the mother tongue of the cave. So it may be in Western civilization we've been talking about the escape from the cave all these years, when really we need to learn how to return. A while back I was doing a video series with David Abram, who is a shining light in this field that I'm addressing. And with Judah's help, we came up with a phrase describing the era that we are in. The phrase is the era of natural consequences. We are experiencing in this day and time the natural consequences of our overbalance into transcendence and rationalism, of our greed, of our excess, of our hubris, and of our ignorance of the depths. And until we, as David and I were talking, until we recover the mother tongue, we're going to go deeper and deeper into the crisis. So let me unpack this just a little bit. A couple of years ago, Judith and I were teaching at Wollaston, and in previous intensives, we had noticed that we spent most all of our time in the building. So we knew the language of that beautiful building very well. What we didn't know was the language of the forest. And so we took our intensive out into the redwood forest for a ceremony. We called it a purification ceremony. So we went to that little waterfall. You've been there? We were going through this purification ceremony. And there was a gasp in the circle of students. I looked up and there was an owl that lighted on a limb just over our circle. And later we found out it was a spotted owl. In a few moments, another owl came up and lighted right next to him to join our circle. We started chanting a tribal song of ours in order to establish rapport. It was a song it's an honor song that we sing only for vision questers. And we felt like these owls were vision questing in our circle. The song goes, Ahiana, Ayoichanayo, Ahiana, Ayoichanayo, Ahiana, Ayoichanayo, Well, we chanted like that for about an hour. In another 10 minutes, 2 half-grown offspring came up and lighted on the limb. So now we have this little gathering of students speaking with this family of ours. Then after a while, we decided to go back and we followed the trail back. And as we went back, all 4 owls, including the 2 smaller ones, followed us limb to limb all the way along the path until we got back to the beginning. For one shining moment, at least, we were speaking about